It was late 1986 at Fort Apache, and Ben Kramer was overseeing the finishing touches on his latest 47-foot project. It was long, really, really long. Long enough to catch anyone's eye, even if it hadn't been painted a neck-breaking shade of yellow. Each side of its hull was cheekily emblazoned with the number 69 Apache lettering in bright red and a pair of lightning bolts rendered in black, electric blue, and white. The seal of Apache Powerboats, based on the design of a gold coin that Apache founder Bob Saxenti had sitting in his desk drawer, rounded off the livery. Lining the top of the hull were the hand-painted names of those who were pivotal to this tribute to the power of engineering and human will. Rigger Bobby Moore, designer Mark McManus, throttleman Bob Saxenti, navigator Bob Idoni, and of course driver Ben Kramer. In the 80s, this list of names read like the credits to an action film. Now, it reads like a who's who of a bygone era, or a where are they now gossip column. By 1987, Kramer would be arrested at a race in Miami. He only got to enjoy his creation in its completed form for less than a year. What transpired in the days following is anyone's guess, and each theory is less credible than the next. One of the more substantiated claims has the boat and rig abandoned on the side of a highway while en route to the shop. Back then, everything was word of mouth. In a world as competitive as powerboating, everyone's verbal account was under suspicion. Enter Lorne Lyville, Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame inductee, Olympic sailor, powerboat champion, and world record holder. Aside from these daring pursuits and his role as head of a home-building empire, his past decades have been dominated by a seemingly unending hunt for Ben Kramer's Apache 47. Lyville feels a deep connection to this Apache in particular, as if he owes it to Ben to keep his boat alive as a testament to him and his legacy. Ben got Lorne into racing, and this boat embodied not only racing history, but personal history. It stood for a set of memories that deserve to be kept alive at all costs.
Hey, this is Kaylee, and I'm in Miami, Florida at TNT Marine on behalf of Vehicle Magazine. Today we are looking at the 47 Apache that's behind me in the process of being rebuilt. So we're just going to talk to the guys a little bit about what's been done, what needs to be done in order to get this thing in the water. So let's have a look.
Back of the boat, this was all pulled apart back here. This is what's known as the drivetrain. You have what's called the trim tabs, opposite drives, gimbals, and the steering system. The drives were all rebuilt, the gimbals were all rebuilt, repainted, tabs were rebuilt, repainted. The whole steering system was, which is the rams, the hoses, all the tie bar assembly, everything was rebuilt, repolished, re-chromed from original.
And so how much horsepower?
Excuse me?
How much horsepower?
I think the engines are around, I want to say around 860 in that area. I know they were around 800 before, but now they used to have old mechanical fuel injected engines, and they've been upgraded to electronic.
And how fast do you think it will go?
Boy, I would think it's probably go over 105, maybe 110 in that area. Yeah.
So what else?
Depending on how light the boat. I know this boat was somewhat of a light layup back in the day when it was built.
Right.
And I'm not sure the exact numbers. I heard it was like 102, 103 on a good day, testing and stuff like that. So,
and what else?
A little bit more horsepower and a little faster.
What else do you think needs to be done to it?
Excuse me?
What else needs to be done to it before we're ready to go?
We're basically re-plumbing everything inside. File from there, you can put on there, and you can look inside there. Come up on the other side of this thing. Everything was re-plumbed down in here. See the sea strainers?
Yep.
All those water hoses were replaced. And now, if you look at the bulkhead up front where the fuel filters and stuff are, all those hoses, everything's going to get re-plumbed, fuel filter assemblies, and basically reform everything with fresh stuff. It's 30, 33 years old, you know? Needs to be redone. The engines were freshened up by Sterling Performance. How far, the extent of what they did, I'm not sure. But again, they were converted from mechanical fuel injection to electronic. So they should be a lot more user-friendly, let's say.
Super cool. All right. Well, thank you so much.
No problem. The other two engines are over there. If you want to look there.
By the early days of his search, Lorne had already heard everything. Whether people were trying to throw him off the boat's trail or simply wanted to be part of a future success story, they all seemed to be misinformed and spreading that misinformation at will. People fabricated sightings all up and down the United States East and Gulf coasts, with the most credible ones placing it somewhere between New Orleans and Miami. Only one thing was for certain: wherever it was in federal custody. Time passes and life goes on. The search may slow down, it may lull, but it by no means stops. It's now 1995 and Lorne gets 3 calls just days apart. On the other end of the line are 3 different excited voices, each belonging to a trusted source, telling him that the Apache 47 that he has been looking for all these years is about to come up at a federal auction of seized assets in Florida. According to the ad in Boat Trader, the boat still had everything: the custom trailer, a spare drive, and even a spare engine. It was obsolete as a race boat at that point, but it was complete, and it was what he had been so hotly pursuing for years. This was his chance. For the most part, the auction featured standard fare for South Florida: gaudy furniture, questionable paintings, and a few Koenig Specials Mercedes-Benzes. The kind of stuff you could imagine being owned by Hollywood's version of a drug lord. Given the event's unremarkable nature and the relative obscurity that Ben's Apache had been shrouded in, Lorne figured that it was basically already a done deal. The boat was practically his, although he had set a budget just in case he found himself in a bidding war. He was banking on the possibility that people had forgotten about the boat in the time between Kramer's arrest and the auction. A considerable amount of time had elapsed, due only to a regulation that stops assets from being auctioned until their owner has been convicted and all appeals have been settled. The auction was crowded, with attendees packed into a tight semicircle. Each person seemed to meld into the next, and the only thing you could make out for certain was a paddle shooting up to place a bid. The Apache was rolled out and bidding began. $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and $80,000. Lorne was surprised that someone was bidding against him, but he was not deterred. His gaze darted around in the seconds when he wasn't placing his next bid, but he was unable to locate his opponent. He needed to know who he was up against. He and his adversary collectively drove the lot up to $160,000, at which point Libel threw in the towel. It just wasn't worth it at that point, especially given how far behind the American dollar the Canadian dollar was at that point. He lost. After so many years of tireless hunting and entertaining outrageous rumors, it just slipped away. The victor, Libel found out as the auction's crowd was clearing, was the cigarette Apache dealer for Saint-Tropez. He was bidding on behalf of a client who had also caught wind of the boat's sale. He never tracked the boat down and did not have the same connection to it, but that was now inconsequential. Libel and his opponent ran in similar circles and were well acquainted enough to approach each other. Lorne, still shell-shocked by recent events, asked incredulously why he didn't just pay him off in advance to not bid. The bidding wouldn't have been driven as high as it was, and all parties would come out on top. "My client really wanted it," he answered. In the end, the deal was done and there was no going back. No use contemplating the ifs, ands, or buts. "Do you want to buy your boat?" An English-French accent offered over a long-distance line. It was 3 weeks after the auction, and the auction's winner was already looking for a buyer for the Apache. The story went that his client was busted for smuggling shortly after the bidding war and urgently needed money for lawyers. The good news: the engines had already been pulled and overhauled, as were related items like the fueling system. The interior, which was largely intact, had been cleaned up. The bad news was that they had sold the trailer right away. It was a gooseneck trailer, and no European was willing to haul something like that. The price was $100,000, firm. Bible, knowing he had the upper hand, accepted the deal under the condition that he would be given free storage while he was having a new trailer built. The funds were wired the next day, and the boat was finally his. Lorne wasted no time figuring out his next steps. He wanted to get the boat out of France as badly as the seller wanted to stop handing out free storage. The first call was Target Trailers out of South Florida. They had built trailers for Lorne in the past, including one for a 47-footer, so they seemed like a safe bet. All they would need to do was replicate the 47-foot trailer they had done before as a regular, over-the-road 3-axle unit with a drive guard. The only obstacle was that Target had just shut down operations. After some convincing, the company's owner fired up the dormant machinery for one last time and created Target's final trailer. Once back in Florida, the boat was a moving showpiece. Lorne didn't necessarily like the lightning bolt paint job, but people seemed to like it. Plus, it was original, and the ultimate goal was to keep the boat fully original, just as Ben intended it. Nearly a decade after its original construction, there had been countless developments in engineering and technology. There were now faster boats and more comfortable boats. The Apache 47's value was not in its performance, but rather its spectacle. It was a relic of powerboating's heyday, and changing any part of its design would ruin that. It needed to be restored. Until he could do that, he ran it as is. It was still an impressive piece, just not perfect. In these intervening years, Bible took pride in giving rides to those who would appreciate it. On one of his many outings with the boat, this time with a tow truck builder and his mechanic, Lorne was taking full advantage of the rough day and was hitting launches as hard as he could. Sure, he was showing off, but what was the rig for if not for showing off? According to the saying, what goes up must come down, and each aggressive launch was paired with an equally aggressive landing. Leibel straight-legged one of these landings, and that's all it took. One of his knees gave out, and that leg was fully out of commission. Despite seeing stars, the only thing he could think about upon pulling back into the dock was checking the oil in all 3 engines and covering the boat back up. All standard things after going for a ride, but tasks that may be considered superfluous while under duress. His companions asked if they could be of any assistance, but Lorne quickly shooed them away, telling them that there was nothing that they could do. He had to suffer through this on his own. In the height of the summer, after running the engines at full throttle for a considerable amount of time, the engine room was unbearable. The heat coming off of the 6 total headers made the space a veritable oven. That, paired with the spring-loaded dipsticks mounted at the bottom of the engines, was a recipe for torture. After checking the oil and covering all 47 feet of the massive machine, he decided he needed to sell it. It may have been the pain talking, but he decided it just wasn't worth the trouble. In the meantime, he would bring it up to Canada and let it sit. About every 6 months for countless years, Lorne would get a call from a guy in New Jersey whom he had never met. Each time he called, the conversation would be short and to the point. "Are you ready to sell the boat?" "No." This began the year he bought the boat, and the caller seemed eternally undeterred by repeated rejections. The caller's timing was apparently impeccable, as he happened to call shortly after Lorne made his vow to rid himself of the boat. He expected the answer to be the same as it always was, and was truly taken aback to hear otherwise. Leibel named an exorbitant price, tacking on a right of first refusal stipulation should the buyer ever want to sell it. The caller accepted without a second thought, drove up, paid cash, loaded the boat, and left. The Apache was finally gone. In the following years, Lorne racked up powerboating championship wins, and the 47-foot became a mere faint memory. He was content with his decision. It was his nephews who were not. Their love for boating was sparked by that very Apache. He decided to humor them by calling the buyer in New Jersey and inquiring as to whether he was contemplating selling. Unsurprisingly, the answer was a firm no. Making this call became something of a habit. Lorne found himself calling every 6 months, just as the buyer himself had once done. Following precedent, one of these semi-annual calls resulted in someone being caught off guard. Years after these calls had started, the buyer in New Jersey decided to become the seller. He was ready to let go of the boat after only having run it twice. Everything was still there, down to the spare drive and the mahogany step ladder that Lorne had built for ingress and egress. It was still sealed off under its dry storage cover. There were a few local boaters who had also been bothering him about selling, but he knew that they would just take it and convert it to run on modern equipment. He was confident that Lorne shared his passion for leaving it original. Neither of the men wanted to negotiate. The seller named a number, one higher than what the boat was actually worth, knowing full well that he would never be able to buy the boat back for less than that amount. Lorne accepted. With that, the restoration that Lorne had long dreamed of commenced. The boat was brought down to Florida, and a team of technicians got to work implementing yesterday's technology, the stuff that nobody wants anymore if they want to be competitive. 3 496 cubic inch engines, each rated at 870 horsepower, with drives rebuilt by TNT Custom Marine. Everything was rebuilt to original specifications, as first intended, inconveniences and all. For Leibel, a full restoration was the only option. Any modernization effort would only serve to drain the machine of its intention and strip it of the impact that it once had. There are new boats on the market that are, in most senses of the word, better. They're easier to own and they can hold speeds that the Apache can only aspire to. But that's not the point. One glance at the Apache's pristine, practically luminescent 47-foot hull on the water, a split-second sample of its brutal roar, and all practical considerations melt away. It is a floating museum dedicated to powerboating's golden era, honoring tradition while still respecting how far the sport has come. It proves the value of perseverance and unwavering dedication to legacy. It is simply put, perfect.